The talks about an 11th team entering the sport have been emerging more and more recently, and while Wolff has been one of the fiercest advocates against this scenario turning into a reality, it seems like the FIA is having none of it. With the popularity and the interest of the sport being at the highest level ever, the governing body understands that in order for them to capitalise on this huge wave of new fans and investors, they need more teams, and that means bad news for the big guys, especially Mercedes, who don't like to share the cake with other team owners. But with Ben Mohammed Sulayem not even willing to talk about the 10-team formation remaining as such in the near future, is Mercedes left out in the dry by the FIA? Formula One is an ever-growing sport, and that's been proven all over again in the past couple of years, especially from 2017 when Liberty Media, a USA-based investment company, purchased the ownership rights from the sport and turned multi-billion dollars in profit in different ways. One of them was creating the Netflix drama Drive to Survive, while the other ways involved implementing new tracks like the one in Las Vegas and Miami. All of this resulted in the USA market, the one that was pretty much cold ever since the Indianapolis scandal from 2005, booming with new fans and a lot of new investors, such as Andretti, who's been knocking on the F1 door ever since 2019. Now that the FIA is finally going to give him an access to approach the sport and to enter it with his own team, which is not going to be that hard considering that he got the financial and commercial backup of Cadillac and is building a massive factory in Indianapolis worth around $500 million to lead all F1 related projects for his team, it's safe to say that there's a lot of potential for the yearly revenue to increase in the coming years. This directly means that the teams would be receiving more money, but the last thing that the sport needs is a couple more drivers who are going to be backmarkers, and this is one of the main concerns that Wolff has when it comes to the 11th team entering the grid. Haas is one of the purest examples as to how a team that has entered the sport from 2016 and onwards has only had a couple of good seasons, followed with two pointless seasons in 2020 and 2021, just for them to barely hold into the midfield right now. According to Wolff, the proper way should be with buying out a struggling squad, such as the case of one of their fiercest rivals off the track, Audi. With Sauber deciding to sell their actions to Audi and Alfa Romeo partnering up with Haas, we have a new manufacturer, but the number of teams remain the same. Teams like Williams and AlphaTauri are also looking very much buyable when it comes to this scenario happening in the first place, but there's always the discrepancy of the side leading the project and the one investing the financial funds. When talking about this matter, Wolff shared his firm stance as he went on to elaborate. We have no visibility of who the applications came from and what the proposals are. I think all the stakeholders, and I mean mainly the FIA and FOM, who decide on such a new entry, will assess if the proposal accretive for F1, what does it bring us in terms of marketing and interest, and whether they want to think about introducing that. Our position was very clear: buy a team. There is a lot of consequences when you look at qualifying sessions. I mean, already now we are looking like on a go-kart track. We are tripping over each other. There is a safety concern. We haven't got the logistics where to put an 11th team. Here in Silverstone, we can accommodate the Hollywood people, but on other circuits, we can't. However, there is one interesting aspect that would definitely go against the 10 existing teams on the grid, and that's the revenue being split to them at the end of the season. Right now, the sport is in a massive boom, and if we compare the numbers, they say it all. In 2020, the worst season of the sport, where the FIA was barely able to make a calendar for racing and the fans were pretty much non-existent on the majority of the races, the sport collected only $1.1 billion. In 2021, the first season when races started to come back with some of the tracks allowing people to watch the race live, accompanied with one of the most anticipated seasons the sport has witnessed, the revenue increased to $2.1 billion. The upcoming season, 2022, was one of the biggest selling seasons for the sport, and with $2.6 billion in the bank account, Formula One teams were only getting more and more profitable thanks to the fact that the sport was getting more and more popular. Now, popularity doesn't come without its own consequences, and if you have American investors who are ready to pour in their money in new tracks and new sponsors for the already existing teams, there comes a time where they want to make their own money by joining the circus. That's something that has been shared by Ben Mohammed Sulayem, the president of the FIA, who believes that there's not just a place for an 11th, but 12th team on the grid as well. With High-Tech applying alongside Andretti to enter the sport from 2025 onwards, and with Calvin Lowe expressing interest in starting his own team, it goes beyond saying that the possibility of not 22 but 24 drivers being present on the grid is very much alive. When talking about this, the president of the FIA went on to say, "I hope we can make the announcement next month. We are talking about serious people and we don't want to exclude anyone without a thorough review of the applications we have received. We are talking about big names and big money. I think the letter of intent idea was the right decision, and the contract says that there can be 12 teams in the F1 field." Of course, we don't just want any team, we want A teams, and we need a car manufacturer. I prefer manufacturers because it will be good for the sport. We've taken our time. The FIA team has worked very hard on the letter of intent. We've had meetings with the teams to review their bids, and I think we'll have a final decision in 4 to 6 weeks. Now, buying out a team is definitely what came into Andretti's mind in the first place, but the fact that none of the teams wanted to sell only goes to show that even though you're one of the worst performing squads out there, you're still making millions in profit, and it doesn't make any sense to sell. Andretti has approached Haas, AlphaTauri, McLaren and Williams for a potential buyout collaboration, but none of them even wanted to hear about such a deal, which is why Mario is focused on creating his own team and be a team owner himself. Furthermore, he doesn't seem to understand as to why the issue with entering a new team is so big, mostly because the new team from America will bring in a lot of new sponsors and a lot of new money, which would directly help the revenue of the sport, and the other teams would actually benefit from this scenario. Nonetheless, he's slammed Wolff for his opinion that the sport should remain exclusive and not change the number of participants, calling him greedy and thinking about the money and not the sport. Luckily for Andretti, it seems like the FIA is on his side, and when talking about having more teams on the grid in the foreseeable future, Ben Mohammed continued to deliver bad news for Wolff as he went on to elaborate. "It's obviously a political and financial issue, but it's clear to me that the FIA has to respect the treaties, and we are regulated by the EU. We cannot manipulate anything. If a team is interested and our rules say that we have so many teams, how can we say no? I understand the concerns of other teams, especially the financial part of it, the distribution of it, but I'm not here to upset anyone. I'm here to do the right thing for the sport. We're happy to sit down with everybody and give advice, but we can't say to a big team that wants to come into F1, go and buy a stable or you can't come. I think that's wrong." This is something that will definitely present an issue for Wolff and the other team owners who are not really willing to let another team race in the sport, especially because they're worried about the safety of the drivers. But as of now, the FIA's rulebook says otherwise, and as long as there are investors who want to create a team and they fulfill all of the criteria, then the remainder of the grid is not to be asked about this question.